This Sunday, abortion backlash.
I honestly can't believe it. I cannot believe it.
Republican concerns grow as Democrats show election strength after the Supreme Court's decision on abortion.
There are five now special elections since the Roe v. Wade decision, and they've all come our way.
The MAGA Republicans have awakened to the powerful force in America, the women of this nation.
How abortion is hurting Republican chances of a big red wave in November. Plus, the Mar-a-Lago affidavit, 184 classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago in January. And the Justice Department believes the Trump team attempted to obstruct justice.
I'm not going to comment on it because I don't know the details.
I'll talk to Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of the January 6th committee. Also, the war in Ukraine.
We fighting for the future of our children, future for our country.
A stalemate at the front, a nuclear reactor in jeopardy, and a mystery murder of a Putin ally. 6 months into the war, I'll talk to former NATO Supreme Allied Commander James Stavridis and former U.S. Ambassador to Russia Michael McFaul. And return to the moon.
This time we're going back. We're going to live there. We're going to learn there.
My conversation with NASA Chief Bill Nelson about tomorrow's unmanned Artemis 1 mission and a new era of U.S. space exploration. Joining me for insight and analysis are NBC News Chief White House Correspondent Peter Alexander, Kimberly Atkins Stohr, Senior Opinion Writer for the Boston Globe, Rich Lowry, Editor of National Review, and PBS NewsHour Chief Correspondent Amna Nawaz. Welcome to Sunday. It's Meet the Press.
From NBC News in Washington, the longest-running show in television history. This is Meet the Press with Chuck Todd.
Good Sunday morning. When the Supreme Court released its Dobbs abortion decision, Republicans cheered the culmination of a nearly 50-year effort to overturn Roe v. Wade and return the issue to the states. But since then, states under Republican control have moved to severely limit access to abortion. 4 more just in the past few days. It has sparked a surge of Democratic anger and enthusiasm at the polls and is suggesting that the predicted red wave in this year's midterm elections is being blunted by a strong blue undertow. Since the Dobbs decision, Democrats have topped Joe Biden's 2020 performance in 4 special House elections. It's a sharp turnaround from the special elections that were held prior to the Dobbs decision, where Republicans were overperforming. And of course, there was the shocking 18-point defeat in Kansas of that anti-abortion ballot measure at the start of this month. In short, Republicans do have an abortion problem politically, and you can see they know it by the way many now are backing off their more extreme positions.
I'm in favor of laws that protect human life. I do not believe that the dignity and the worth of human life is tied to the circumstances of their conception. But I recognize that that's not a majority position, and therefore I've always said I support bills that have exceptions.
I support a ban on very late term and partial birth abortion. And most Americans agree with that.
I'm pro-life, but I oppose a federal abortion ban.
At the same time, Democrats are working hard to pivot and make abortion rights the issue of the midterms, like Pat Ryan did in that special election.
How can we be a free country if the government tries to control women's bodies? That's not the country I fought to defend.
Blake wouldn't just ban abortion, he'd criminalize it. Forced pregnancies for rape and incest.
So we're going to do something a little different. We're going to start this morning with the politics of abortion and our expert panel, which includes PBS NewsHour Chief Correspondent Amna Nawaz, NBC News Chief White House Correspondent Peter Alexander, Rich Lowry, the editor of National Review, and Kimberly Atkins Stohr, the senior opinion writer for the Boston Globe. Rich, I keep coming back to a moment you and I were on the air. I think it was after the leaked pre-Dobbs decision where you were like, look, the midterms are going on a trajectory in favor of the Republicans, but abortion could change everything. Are we at the change everything moment?
I don't know whether it changes everything, but clearly it's an important change. And I think Republicans have to realize they can't run and hide from this issue. You try to do that, it's not going to work. You're going to get defined in a way you're not going to like. And you can't, in most places, adopt a maximalist position. So I think they need to do a version of what Rubio did, say, I want to protect every unborn child eventually. I realize I have a lot of work to do, public persuasion on that. In the meantime, here's a limit I support that actually is defensible and has public support, and then point at the other side for being extremists for supporting abortion in every circumstance with federal funding.
You know, Kimberly, that is what Blake Masters in Arizona attempted to do. And when he debuted this ad, he also tried to scrub his website. And, you know, we could show right before his website on the abortion issue was, I'm 100% pro-life. We can put it up. And he was, in fact, a supporter of the federal personhood law. He got rid of that. Now, they have said, his spokesperson said he still believes everything that was on there before, but it feels like, you know, they handled it slightly differently than Marco Rubio.
They did. And in that ad, if you listen to what he's saying he supports is actually what was allowed under Roe. It was the law before Roe was overturned. And I think it's more than just Republicans realizing that their rhetoric is wrong right now. I think they're realizing where their rhetoric meets actual real-life consequences, whether it's a 10-year-old victim of a crime who's being forced into a pregnancy, or a 19-year-old woman in South Carolina whose fertility may be threatened due to the fact that she can't get the medical care she needs after an incomplete miscarriage. How is that pro-life? Republicans are realizing that they are not doctors, they are not physicians, and they didn't realize the consequences of what they were supporting.
Well, it's funny you bring up the South Carolina incident. I want to actually play that lawmaker. He talked about this person you're talking about. Her water broke at week 15, and basically it was against South Carolina law for them to do anything about it. Here's his description.
She's going to pass this fetus in the toilet. She's going to have to deal with that on her own. There's a 50% chance, greater than 50% chance, that she's going to lose her uterus. There's a 10% chance that she will develop sepsis and herself die. That weighs on me. I voted for that bill. These are affecting people.
Amna, this is, you know, we've talked every metaphor. They've caught the car, and it goes to something Rich said. Republicans weren't prepared for every aspect of what they needed to talk about when it came to this issue.
Not nearly. I think that's abundantly clear now. And it's not just Republicans. You know, I've talked to so many folks on the ground, been reporting on the potential reversal of Roe for so many months leading up to the decision. And you saw even the groups on the ground who were advocating under this very broad pro-life umbrella were not prepared to answer very detailed questions about what does that mean? When do you make exceptions? How do you view IVF? If a child is raped in your state, how do you view that? And you saw divisions within the Republican Party and among self-described conservatives showing up in exactly those cases. The child who was raped and impregnated in Ohio, even state officials there and pro-life advocates on the ground disagreed about how to handle that.
Peter, Glenn Youngkin, governor of Virginia, was in Michigan. Our reporters caught up with him, and he's basically, look, you know, the only people I'm talking to are worried about the cost of living, worried about kids in schools. He was still on the pay no attention to the issue of abortion here. I don't know if that's going to be able to hold.
I was speaking to Republican strategists just yesterday. They say that issue is receding. We're watching it recede. The big marquee at every intersection is the price of gas right now. It's now gone down for 70-plus consecutive days. But I was speaking to Abigail Spanberger. You're speaking about Virginia. Spoke to her yesterday. She launched her campaign. The first political ad out is on the issue of abortion rights. Beto O'Rourke, the first ad on the issue of abortion rights. And this, she says, it's not just about abortion. It's about freedom, as we saw from Pat Ryan in Pennsylvania, almost sort of co-opting a line from Republicans, from Tea Party, you know, the Tea Party in the past, like the Democrats or the Libertarians here in some way. But the uncertainty, she says, is really benefiting those independents that will now begin leaning toward Democrats. The way the economic uncertainty helped Republicans in some way, this uncertainty about what's really at stake helps Democrats.
You know, go ahead, Rick.
I was just going to say, on these terrible cases with miscarriages, this is another aspect where Republicans, they really need to know the case. They really need to know what these laws say. And every one of these laws has a broad health exception, not just life of the mother, but also physical impairment, including losing a uterus is obviously a physical impairment. And this woman in South Carolina did get her miscarriage care. But Republicans need to be out there aggressively saying that, making the case, and attorney generals need to be making it clear to the attorneys at hospitals and medical facilities what the law actually says, because there's a lot of bad advice being given.
I think it's also important to point out, though, with miscarriages, which are, excuse me, much more common than we talk about in this country, these are things we have long known, right? That miscarriages can easily result in sepsis, that there is a risk to having a child in America, in particular for black women who are 3 times more likely to die because of pregnancy-related issues.
Pro-lifers do not oppose miscarriage treatment. Catholic hospitals that refuse on high moral principle to perform abortions will care for miscarriage.
That is true, but in many
this is a misunderstanding.
Some of those miscarriage cases now have to be litigated on a case-by-case basis.
They shouldn't be. There should be clear guidance on this.
The message that carries the day, though, at the end of the day, is not them trying to find the nuance and explain the difference in each state. It's women like Nancy Davis. This is a black woman in Louisiana who we heard from just this week, who learned that her baby, the fetus in her belly, is not going to have a skull and would die just days after it's born. As she said, and I think this was one of the most powerful sound bites we heard in the course of the last several weeks, she said, I have to carry my baby to bury my baby. And it's that messaging that is now being heard across the country as real examples are demonstrated, even where there may be exceptions in those states.
And there aren't exceptions in all these cases. And I think that's the problem. These lawmakers don't even know what's in these laws, which is why you're seeing the DOJ stepping in and trying to enforce federal law that requires health-saving care for federally funded hospitals, and sort of battling where in places like Idaho.
I read every single one of these laws, and there is a health exception in every single one of these laws, literally.
Well, I think Merrick Garland would disagree in Idaho, at least.
Rich, the irony here is I had a Republican pollster who's, and I've said this before, I'd say he pulled his hair out, but he doesn't have that much hair anymore. But he's like saying 15 weeks, like Kevin Bacon in Animal House, remain calm. He's frustrated because 15 weeks didn't have a majority against. Mm-hmm. It's not to say it's the most popular position, but it didn't have a majority against. And it's like, if they actually let Roberts get the compromise, it would be Democrats having a political problem. That's the irony here.
That's not the Supreme Court's rule.
No, it's not.
At all.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. The court should faithfully interpret the Constitution. Doesn't matter whether it creates a blue wave, a red wave. Doesn't matter if it puts Republicans in an awkward position because they're scared and confused and don't know how to talk about it. That's not the court's job.
Well, they have certainly launched what is a massive political change that we're watching here. You guys are great. We're going to pause this part of the conversation. I want to now thank the panel. We're going to turn to what we learned from Friday's release of the Mar-a-Lago affidavit. The affidavit revealed that there were 184 classified documents in 15 boxes that were recovered in January. Those documents included 67 that were marked confidential, 92 that were marked secret, and 25 marked top secret. The heavily redacted affidavit also revealed that the Justice Department feared there was, quote, probable cause to believe that evidence of obstruction will be found in this month's search. So joining me now is a member of the January 6th committee. It's Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. Congressman, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Let me start with the affidavit with you. It seems as if Justice wanted to charge the former president with a crime, doesn't it appear they already have enough evidence just simply on the mishandling of these classified documents?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm no expert in, what it takes to indict somebody. I'm a pilot. That's about it. But knowing what I know, I look at this and I go, my goodness. I mean, Chuck, if any of us in the House of Representatives, who by our election we have, in essence, the highest level of security clearance, if any of us walked out intentionally with even one document from the SCIF, which is where we can go see classified documents at, and our organization came to us, the House came to us and said, you got to give this document back, and we refused to do it for years, we'd be in real trouble. Not just one document in this case. We know of 180 plus then what was gotten after this search. I mean, the hypocrisy of folks in my party that spent years chanting lock her up about Hillary Clinton because of some deleted emails or quote unquote wiping a server are now out there defending a man who very clearly did not take the national security of the United States to heart, and it'll be up to DOJ whether or not that reaches the level of indictment. But this is disgusting in my mind, and like this, no president should act this way, obviously.
Look, you're pursuing a different investigation. Whether these documents that we withheld are documents that are helpful to your investigation, how are you able to find that out? Is there going to be a broad subpoena that your committee issues to get a look at what he was hoarding at Mar-a-Lago?
Yeah, it's not an answer we have at this moment. I think we have to kind of figure out where does this fall. We're not going to get access to documents that are specifically on national security and nothing about January 6th as an example. We'll never be able to know that. But I think it's important for us to take a look at kind of the broad areas, and if it seems like there may be something that's kind of in a broad area, potentially. But again, this is stuff that, from what we understand, may even be beyond what Congress, short of being on a specific committee, would have access to.
When it comes to what Justice may be looking at, I mean, I go back to, if this were simply about him mishandling classified information and the fact that they're not pursuing that charge, is it fair to assume they're looking at something that would be even more serious than this?
That's my perception. I mean, look, mishandling classified information is one thing, and particularly if it was unintentional. If you accidentally did take something home, there may be consequences, but I think you look into the intentionality of that. When you have what we appear to know, just through some of what we've seen, they approached the president, the former president, with things that he had. He claimed he either didn't have them or claimed he gave them up, any of those kinds of stuff, and we know he didn't. There's intentionality there. I mean, this seems big. And when you look at some of the president's biggest kind of cheerleaders, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Jim Jordan, have gone kind of silent.
Yeah.
That tells you all you need to know, too. Look, it's like they're basically sitting here saying, we didn't start this fire, and walking away, but, they obviously ignited it. They're the ones that have sat there and told this president everything he did was right, everything he could do would be okay, and they defended him at the beginning of this.
When it comes to what you guys are getting ready to lay out to the public in September, can you give us a sense of what are the missing pieces that you didn't have that you feel like the public is going to understand better come September?
Well, I think the missing piece, I think there's going to be a lot of depth that we're able to build, whether it's through these hearings or whether it's through the final report. So if you think about, for instance, the last hearing, the one Elaine, Lowry, and I did, we talked about what was the president doing during the 187 minutes. Well, we did basically an hour and a half hearing. We probably could have done one that was 4 or 5. So there'll be more depth to some of that. Some of the links. I think one of the more intriguing thing is going to be some of the financing, right? Some of the fundraising, the fact that, a vast majority of this money was raised and under quote unquote stop the steal with no intention of doing anything to stop so-called stop a steal. It was all about just raising money, and people were abused that way. And so there's going to be a lot more of that. And I think we have a lot more to find out still about this Secret Service incident. I mean, there's a whole lot of we're still sitting around like, why don't we have some of these text messages? Why was some of this stuff hidden? And I think we'll get answers to that by the time we can present that to the American people.
I want to get you to respond to something Rich Lowry wrote earlier this week in an op-ed in the New York Times. And he was talking about the January 6th committee and sort of the difficulty you may be having in proving a crime, because he writes this: Trump engaged in a political offense against our constitutional system that criminal statutes are ill-suited to address, no matter how infamous the conduct. Do you agree with that?
No, not at all. Look, I had a lot of respect for Rich Lowry. I still read him on occasion. It's been amazing to watch his pivot from kind of intellectual conservative to like this anti-Trumper. So he's against people that are against Trump. He's not necessarily for him. And so he's constantly with this, well, there may be not precedents. Of course there's not precedents. We've never had a president of the United States attempt a coup against the United States of America. So there's no precedents. And if we need a new law, let's get a new law. But I'm quite sure that some of the laws can cover this. The DOJ seems very convinced of it. And secondarily, Rich, our job is not to prosecute Trump. Our job is to present information to the American people, to talk about recommendations. Here's what I recommend, and I'm going to say this even before the report. I recommend we never again elect somebody who does not respect the Constitution of the United States, who does not respect the voters, and who abuses people by lying to them. That is Donald Trump. And people can be anti those that are against Donald Trump, but we're not against Donald Trump for any personal reasons, except we love the United States of America, and he is tearing it down daily.
I want to ask you a quick political question. This week we saw the primaries in Florida and New York, that special election in New York. I want to read you something Matthew Continetti wrote. A about the abortion issue in the Republican Party. He noted the Journal's op-ed page says the GOP has an abortion problem. And the problem, Republicans have no idea what to say about abortion. Do you agree essentially with that sentiment and that this may have changed the political complexion of the midterms?
I think it's definitely changed the complexion of the midterms some. I don't know how big. Look, I've always taken the position of rape, incest, life of the mother, and, you know, certain weeks up until 15 weeks or whatever. And that was actually a fairly common thing in the Republican Party. Even Donald Trump said rape, incest, life of the mother exceptions. And now you've been seeing these Republicans go, there is absolutely no exception, because somehow in the Republican Party, the crueler you are, the more likely you are to win a primary. So Blake Masters, for instance, can erase his website all he wants and now pretend like he's some soft on this guy. Yeah. But he isn't, because he used it to win a primary. And so, yeah, I think Republicans are in real trouble because we have no leadership. This is the problem, Chuck. So Kevin McCarthy isn't leading. He's asking, what does Marjorie Taylor Greene want me to do? Mitch McConnell's just trying to save the Senate. He's probably not going to do that. We have no leaders, and no wonder our base basically believes everything Donald Trump says. I'm just curious.
Liz Cheney said that in some cases she may have to help a Democrat win against sort of an anti-democracy Republican. Do you feel that's what you're going to be doing over the next couple of years yourself?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, look, the biggest issue, not everybody agrees with me, certainly in my party, and even Democrats that like to say things like, well, but you're still a conservative. Yeah, I'm a conservative. But the bottom line is the biggest threat right now to our country is democracy. And if you have Republicans that are running against even left-wing Democrats that believe in democracy and believe in voting, that person should be elected over somebody who basically would overthrow the will of the people and ultimately destroy this country. This country cannot survive outside of democracy. It'll turn into a power struggle between groups of different races, of different ethnicities, of different religions, because the thing that holds us together is this belief that we can self-govern. Take that away, this country's a mess. And so Republicans that are for that have no place in office. I don't care what their policy position on taxes are.
Adam Kinzinger, Republican from Central Illinois. Congressman Kinzinger, thanks for coming on, sharing your perspective with us, sir.
You bet. Good seeing you.
When we come back, how secure is that threatened nuclear plant in Ukraine? And who's responsible for the car-bombing death of a Putin ally in Russia? Former NATO Supreme Allied Commander James Stavridis and former U.S. Ambassador to Russia Michael McFaul both join me next. Welcome back. A team from the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, is set to visit that endangered nuclear power plant in Ukraine this week. Fighting around the plant has sparked fears of a nuclear catastrophe, and people in the region are now being given iodine pills to help prevent radiation-induced cancers in case of a nuclear disaster. What was supposed to be a lightning-fast Russian military victory, of course, has run into a ferocious Ukrainian defense, and it has now turned into a bloody stalemate on the front lines after 6 months of war. So joining me now are former NATO Supreme Allied Commander James Stavridis and former U.S. Ambassador to Russia Michael McFaul. Gentlemen are experts on this in this area. Appreciate having you both. Jim, let me start with you and Zaporizhia and the nuclear plant. We've talked about this before. At what point is there no longer hope that Russia and Ukraine work this out, but that the United States or NATO needs to step in and protect this plant?
We're getting closer by the day, Chuck. Unfortunately, what really concerns me here is the fact that we don't have to imagine how bad this can be. It happened in 1986 in Chernobyl. It happened about a decade ago in Fukushima, Japan. We're looking at billions and billions of dollars, potentially thousands of lives, if this core is breached due to, in this case, an act of war. So the good news here, Chuck, is that the IAEA, you mentioned a moment ago, appears close to getting a mission, potentially led, by the way, by the head of the IAEA, an esteemed scientist himself, into the plant. But so far, the Russians are dug in here, and they've got three things they want. They want to use this nuclear plant as a sanctuary to conduct attacks. They want to cut off 20% of Ukraine's electricity.
Right.
And above all, they want to scare the Europeans. They want a cloud to hang over European thinking on this, pun intended.
Right. Mike, I want to talk about Putin's decision this week to expand the size of his military, but not launch a draft. He continues to walk this line, it seems, for fear of upsetting his own population. But what does that say that he felt the need to find more troops?
I think first and foremost it says, Chuck, that he has not won this war, that the strategic objectives that he outlined 6 months ago, he's failed on all of them. Remember, 6 months ago he said he was going to unite Ukrainians and Russians because Ukrainians are just Russians with accents. He failed at that. He failed at denazification. He failed at demilitarization. He failed to take the capital of Kiev, and now he's just fighting in Donetsk and in Kherson. And now he needs to bring new troops just to fight in that stalemated situation. So on the strategic level, I think he's failed in this war. I don't see him recovering, but he still wants to focus on taking Donbass. That is his new objective, and he needs new soldiers to do that.
Mike, I want to stay with you a minute here and Putin's political situation. The car bombing of a political ally. There's all sorts of speculation, they're from false flag to a either unauthorized, authorized Ukrainian operation. But isn't the simplest explanation that maybe it's Russians unhappy? And if that's the case, how lethal is that to the future of Vladimir Putin?
Well, first, back to your earlier question, that's why you can't do a draft across the board, because that would make Russians unhappy. Second, we don't know who killed Daria Dugina. I want to be clear. There's lots of speculation about it. But immediately after she was attacked, a Russian partisan group, the National Republican Army, I'd never heard of them, Chuck, and I know all of these obscure groups in Russia, came out with a manifesto saying that this was part of a partisan war to overthrow Putin. And then a former parliamentary, an MP, Ilya Ponomaryov is his name, the only Russian to vote against annexation of Crimea back in 2014, sitting in Kiev, published their manifesto. Again, I can't conclude that it's true or not, but the idea that it exists is a new development in this war.
Yeah, domestic problems. If this is being brought to Moscow, that has got to be troubling to Putin. Jim, let me go from the Ukrainian side of things. Winter is coming, and I'm not just doing that to promote tonight's next episode of House of Dragon. What does the Ukrainian military need to accomplish before winter sets in?
Well, if they could get a dragon and call Dockeries and flamethrow the Russians, that would be a big help. I don't think that's going to happen. What they need to accomplish is exactly what is happening. Take these excellent weapons we are giving them, not quite dragons, but HIMARS, long-range cruise missiles that can reach out and touch the Black Sea Fleet. Continue these behind enemy lines operations that are starting to look like shots out of Mission Impossible. The Ukrainian offensive, I think, is going to kick off in earnest after Labor Day, Chuck. They're aware that the world wakes up after Labor Day. They want to show they've got the ability to go on the offense. Look for that next.
Are we at, and both, this is a final question to both of you. Mike, it seems as if the Russians are preparing for a years-long conflict. And Jim, it seems as if Ukraine knows they can't do years-long conflict. So, Mike, how do you view this? How do you see this ending? And then, Jim, finally to you. So, Mike, you first.
That's right, Chuck. The Ukrainians don't want it to be a years-long conflict. It costs a lot, $5 billion a year they're getting from the West. They'll eventually run out of resources, military, these HIMARS that Admiral Stavridis was just talking about. That's why they want to go on the offensive in the south. The city of Kherson is what they want to take. They want to push the Russians out for the first time. With respect to the Russians, they think time's on their side, and they think the longer the war goes, it'll play to their advantage. And Putin right now is focusing on trying to take Donbass. What's striking to me, Chuck, is he's been focused on trying to take Donbass for 6 months and still hasn't achieved that objective. That says to me that maybe Putin is wrong about time being on his side.
Jim?
I'll pick up Ambassador McFaul's points. I think he's right on. Above my head is the game of risk. Both sides are playing it. Putin, I think, has got a burn rate in people and equipment that is frankly higher than the Ukrainians. Ukrainians are going to count on patience from the West. I'll take that side of the game of risk, the one that the Ukrainians hold.
That is quite the signage that you have behind your head there. That's a cool, old school looking version of that game that for some of us was a staple between that and Stratego. Anyway, Jim Stavridis, Mike McFaul, as always, appreciate both of you being on here and sharing your expertise. When we come back, President Biden's decision to forgive up to $20,000 in student debt. If it's such good politics, why are so many Democrats unhappy about it? We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back, part two of the panel, if you will. And we're going to start, Peter, with the decision by President Biden to cancel the student debt. And I say decision. What's interesting is it was months to get him to this.
Yeah.
Here we are, and it is Democrats that are divided amongst themselves about whether this was a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's right. So some progressives obviously wanted it to be $50,000. Tim Ryan, up for the Senate seat in Ohio right now, is basically saying, you know, this is the wrong decision. You don't need to be helping.
Let me put up the names. I mean, it's a who's who of some Democrats on the ballot right now that have hit it. You mentioned Ryan, sends the wrong message. Michael Bennet doesn't solve the underlying problem. Catherine Cortez Masto doesn't address the root problem. Jared Golin's in a swing district in Maine. Chris Pappas, swing district in New Hampshire. Anybody in a swing district or a swing state didn't seem to love this.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, this is going to cost $250 billion to $550 billion, depending who you talk to right now. Even Goldman Sachs says that it won't be inflationary, but it's a challenging message for the Democrats to sort of defend right now in front of a lot of people, working class Americans who they say they're benefiting here. There's some new ads that are out already running in parts of the country where you see, you know, a mechanic and you see others basically saying,
you're like playing producer for me. Let me show the ad.
Okay.
Let's instead of you describing it, let's play it.
Good.
I'm breaking my back out here for one reason.
I want to pay off some other guy's debt.
Biden's plan to pay other people's college loans using my tax dollars is a great idea.
Biden's right. You should take my tax dollars to pay off your debts. My family will figure out how to get by with less.
Now, Amna, the White House pushback on this is, oh, yeah, PPP loans.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's their pushback.
It's clear this issue has brought out the snark on both sides, right? That was unusually trolly for the White House, too, I'd say, to do that. And I actually asked Senator John Thune about that, and he said that's not what this is about at all. We're talking about apples and oranges. And look, the unfairness message, I think, is one you're going to see Republicans lean into again and again, Democrats in swing districts, as you mentioned. And the people who say this doesn't solve the underlying problem are absolutely right. It does not bring down the soaring cost of college, not even a little bit. But it will make a difference in millions of Americans' lives. And it will make some difference. If the average college debt is around $30,000, it's making a huge dent. It will disproportionately impact low-income families, black and brown people in America. The question is, does it make a difference in the longer term? Does it bring them out to vote?
My political question for the two of you is, I think this plays out as following. If you benefit from this, you'll never forget. If you're upset about it, you'll probably move on to something else in a week.
I think that that's absolutely right. And I think both on the political and the policy side, it's important. First of all, this is something Joe Biden promised to do on the campaign trail. He said immediately. A year plus in is not exactly immediately, but he's doing it. But it has to be paired, as you said, exactly right. This doesn't get to the bottom of the issue, the soaring costs of education. And I think people get the idea that people should not be saddled with debt for the rest of their lives based on trying to better themselves, and that you have to get to the affordability and you have to get to the racial wealth gap that this exacerbates and move beyond that. I don't think that people would say, why is the fire department putting that guy's house fire out when my house isn't on fire? That's a terrible way to try to
the courts may say, sorry, you can't do this, and they throw it back to Congress.
Yeah,
that's always possible.
That's what I was going to go to. I think the first order of business on this for me is for the President of the United States unilaterally to spend, maybe it could be $500 billion, could go up to $1 trillion, to spend that much money on his own with no clear congressional authority whatsoever is a grotesque abuse of power. I don't care what the politics or the policy are. The question is, can someone get standing against it, demonstrating some direct harm? But if someone does get standing, this thing will be slammed in the Supreme Court. Yes, Biden promised to do it, and he wanted Congress to do it, which everyone else thought was necessary until the day before yesterday.
Right, which I think even Speaker Pelosi and Joe Biden both seem to hint at that. All right, I want to shift. Speaking of the White House getting aggressive, Amna, President Biden used the F. He's used the F word before, but he used another F word.
Let's clarify.
Yeah, I know. And the F word I'm talking about, there's a reason is fascism.
Yeah.
And it was, look, that's quite aggressive.
It is, and especially for the president. It's something we've heard within Democratic ranks before. And look, I do think he's being responsive to some degree because we have seen concerns over threats to democracy go up. In terms of voter concerns, in terms of what people are paying attention to.
Tops in our poll.
Certainly after the public hearings of the January 6th committee. And I also think the more we get information about some of these classified documents from Mar-a-Lago, this continues to kind of rise on people's radars. And this is the president reacting to that and kind of meeting his voters where they are.
And Chuck, what's interesting about this, when he, as you described, used the word semi-fascism to describe the MAGA philosophy this week. Let's go back to March when he was in Poland. He said of Vladimir Putin that he couldn't stay in power. And that became controversial. The White House, backpedaled on that and walked that back. There's no backpedaling on this. It's clear that there's a more aggressive strategy. We talked about the way that they were handling the debate over student loans.
Do you think he actually soft-pedaled it? Do you think someone said you should say fascism and he said, I'm going to say semi-fascism?
When I spoke to Age, this wasn't a teleprompter speech. This is what he's been thinking. They say he said it out loud. This was done not on camera. But it fires up Democrats. It juices up the base because they want to see him be more aggressive on that. But it also does, it does become problematic because, this is a guy who said he wanted to be a unifier.
Here's my issue, just as a political science geek, is does anybody know the definition of socialism and fascism and all of this when we start to throw these words out there? But anyway, it's going to be tossed out there. Is the anti-democracy message helping Democrats?
I think the anti-Trump message helps. To the extent they can make Trump front and center, it helps two political entities in the United States of America, the Democratic Party and Donald Trump. And this is true of the FBI search in Mar-a-Lago. Maybe the effect will wear off over time, but it has bonded Republican voters to Donald Trump when they had been slowly falling away from him. And it's in part because, and I'm very comprehensively pro-law enforcement, but there's this sheen now of radical doubt about any sort of investigation of this sort. And I will not believe anything about these documents myself until I basically get a top secret clearance, get to go into a skiff and look at them myself. Because with Russia, there are so many leaks that were spun up
but listen, going
with
back
so much
to
hysteria
the
by
first
the media.
part of your point about whether it's anti-fascism or anti-Trump, I think you can't separate those two. And I think even for a lot of Republicans, particularly after the January 6th committee, they have been feeling that. There has been a fatigue. There has been an idea that this is not helping anyone, and there is a push to move away from that.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to end it here because I got to go to the moon. When we come back, first we're going to talk to you about the midterms are usually a referendum on the party in power. But what if it's the party out of power that gets punished for the Supreme Court? That's next. Welcome back. Data download time. The midterms, usually a referendum on the party in power in Washington. And that tends to mean the White House and Congress. But this summer has brought a lot of attention to the party that's in power in the third branch of government, the judiciary. And the latest NBC News poll shows a lot of lost faith in the Supreme Court following its decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Let me show you. At the start of this new 6-3 majority court, the public was giving the benefit of the doubt, plus 25 positive over negative. Now, as you can see, the negative number in particular has more than doubled, and now the Supreme Court is like every other institution here in Washington, underwater. And it's really across the board, as you can see. Look, across the demographic groups, the court had net positive ratings before the Dobbs decision. Now, if you look at this, men underwater by a point, women by double digits, younger folks by double digits. Really, only older Gen X and younger boomers are still positive on this court, but even their numbers have dropped quite a bit. And if you look at it by party, you can see 60-point swing among Democrats to the negative, 40-plus point swing to the independents negative. Even Republicans dropped a little bit. There's really only one part of the Republican coalition that is happy about this court. It won't surprise you, evangelical Christians, because in many ways this decision was one that this voting group cared about more than any other part of the Republican Party, plus 35 points. The problem for Republicans is it's not a big enough group to overcome all the negative with swing voters. When we come back, look who's going back to the moon. My talk with NASA Chief Bill Nelson about our goals to fly to the moon and beyond. Welcome back. America is getting back in the moon business. NASA's Artemis 1 is scheduled to lift off tomorrow morning from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. This unmanned flight is to orbit the moon in preparation for landings on the moon and beyond. And it's supposed to orbit for over a month. This past week, I spoke with former Senator and current NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, who, as a member of the House back in the 80s, flew on the Space Shuttle Columbia. And I began by asking Nelson why it's taken us so long to return to the moon.
We had to focus that we need to be on the moon for much longer periods of time than just landing like we used to, stayed a couple days and left. This time we're going back. We're going to live there. We're going to learn there. We're going to develop new technologies, all of this so we can go to Mars with humans.
And the point, when you say we're going to live on the moon, are we living there as scientists, or is the goal we're going to end up living there?
I don't think in the short run we're going to live there. I think all of this is to develop where we may be living on other worlds. They may be floating worlds. They may be the surface of Mars. But this is just part of our push outward, our quest to explore, to find out what's out there in this universe.
This Artemis 1, it's been a big project in the making. It's taken years. There's the usual delays that you have. If this doesn't work, what does that mean for NASA?
Well, it's going to work. This first flight is a test. We test it, we stress it. We make this rocket and the spacecraft do things that we would never do with a human crew. The main purpose of the flight is to test the heat shield, because you can't test that in a lab. Right. So if the heat shield survives and does what it is expected to do, it's a successful test. So then we're ready in 2 years.
You've made it clear you're stress testing, meaning you may push this to the limit where it looks like an accident, but if it is, that's not necessarily a failure.
You can expect in a test flight that everything is not going to go as you expect it to. That's part of a test flight. That's part of, for example, developing aircraft. That's why you have a test pilot. But we're pretty confident about this.
NASA, for the last 30 years, has had a pretty successful partnership with Russia. Obviously, seems to look like it's going to split up. You have been Mr. Optimism. You're basically, it seems as if you're ignoring the rhetoric and assuming as soon as the war is over, things will go back to normal. Why are you so optimistic?
Well, let me say at the outset that what Putin has done in Ukraine is inexcusable. It's a slaughter. It's awful. But we were squared off against each other with the Soviet Union in the Cold War. And yet we had American astronauts and Soviet cosmonauts rendezvoused and docked and lived together in Apollo-Soyuz in the midst of the Cold War, 1975. And that cooperative civilian space program relationship has continued all the way to this day. And despite the horrors that are going on in Ukraine, the professionalism, the relationship between the astronauts and the cosmonauts on board the International Space Station, as well as our two mission controls, one in Houston, one in Moscow, it doesn't miss a beat.
All right, so let's turn to China. China's got an aggressive space program, and yet they seem to want nothing to do with anybody. Why is that?
Because they're very secretive. They don't want any kind of cooperation. They are non-transparent. They send their rockets to blast their ASAT, and they put all of this space junk that hinders.
Are they rushing things? Like when you watch them from afar, does it look like they're so insistent in trying to catch up to us that they're rushing it and cutting corners?
They're not cutting corners. They are good. And they've gotten a lot of the technology from everybody else. Gotcha. And as a result, they're very good. But we have offered, come on and start cooperating with us. They just don't want to do that. And you see that as evidence in our government-to-government relations with the Chinese. You see that, for example, they go out and they take the Spratly Islands and say, this is our territory.
Well, how are we going to prevent that from the
Kong.
moon? Because I was thinking about, is the moon going to turn into the South China Sea, where when China gets up there, we're up there? Is it going to be a land grab?
Well, we have to be careful about that. And that's what I've said all along, that we're in a space race. And we want to get to the south pole of the moon where the resources are, where we think water is. If there's water, there's rocket fuel. And we don't want China suddenly getting there and saying, this is our exclusive territory. That's what they did with the Spratly Islands.
One last question on the Space Force. There's always been a military component. First the Army, then the Air Force, now Space Force. How has things changed? And does Space Force do launches that we're probably not aware of all the time?
For the defense of the country, both defensive and offensive, space has become the next battleground. It's the high ground. And what you've seen is not only satellites that give us early warning of any attack on Earth, including a nuclear attack, but you've seen the eyes and ears for us to have some certainty of what our adversaries are doing. Those assets now, because of the development of technology, are being challenged. And therefore, there are other assets that are developed in order to prevent those challenges. So space is the high ground that you want to retain. And that's why you're seeing, as you suggest, the Space Force becoming a major part of our national defense system.
Now, we said that tomorrow's flight is unmanned. That's still technically true, but on the voyage will be a Snoopy stuffy, if you will, which will indicate zero gravity when astronaut Snoopy starts to float, and there will be mannequins as well. Think of them as crash test dummies, or what NASA calls moonikins. Anyway, good luck, NASA. And if it's not tomorrow, a couple other weather windows next Friday and next Monday. That's all we have for today. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week, because if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.